What are things that you've learned in some like evergreen D2C e-commerce marketing strategies that have worked in the past and that you see continuing to work into the future? And
Having your marketing team be really open to leading into those tools. I always said to my team at Walmart, it's not AI that's going to replace your job. It's the folks using AI that will. So I think the more we can adopt those practices, the better.
any insights that you can share and just overall tips, tricks for D2C e-commerce marketing?
For sure. I would say pivoting a little bit away from content and creative and getting a little bit more into media investment. One thing that I have advocated for a lot over the past few years is starting to lessen that dependency on paid media investment by really building out a holistic marketing program that, is looking at performance, leveraging whether it's MTA or MMM models, understanding how your channels are influencing one another. I find, some companies are still looking at things in a really linear way, and the consumer journey is no longer linear. We need to be making sure that we are developing content that is reaching folks at the right time and where they're consuming content.
Everybody, welcome to the CrowdCreate Podcast. The purpose of this is really to bring on thought leaders, especially in the world of marketing, to help companies and other business owners grow. I consider you, Heather, to be one of the top D2C e-commerce marketing experts out there. I was very impressed with your background working with the largest retailer, Walmart, and other top names out there like Guthrie Ranker, Best Buy. But yeah, would love an introduction from yourself.
Jeff alluded to, I have worked in D2C and e-commerce for quite some time for some very big brands, but also some startups along the way. And I think we're in a really interesting time as AI comes into play and technology is moving at an incredibly rapid pace. So it's a really fun and exciting time to be in digital. And I'm excited to dig in and talk a little bit about it.
So I guess, to start off with, like, what are things that you've learned in some like evergreen D2C e-commerce marketing strategies that have worked in the past and that you see continuing to work into the future? And, for us, search engine optimization has always been the key, whether you're looking to buy furniture or whether you're looking to buy fashion, shoes, online reviews and social commerce has always worked well. But yeah, what has worked the best for you, would you say, in your career?
For sure. So it's interesting that you bring up SEO because obviously historically that's something that I've really rallied for in terms of investing resources into building out your SEO strategy and really investing the time and appreciating that SEO is a long game channel, if you want to look at it like that. And what's happened over the last couple of years, as you know, is it's become an incredibly competitive space. And it's also, Google's almost made it to be more of a pay to play scenario to land on page one. It's a lot trickier now to do that. So it really comes down to, I think, diversifying your portfolio in terms of the channels that you're investing in. But also there's a lot of kind of tips and tricks and hacks, if you like, particularly for those teams that are budget constraints and limited on resources, which is figuring out ways to scale your content and your creative, which I feel like, I've been in marketing for a long time. That always seems to be kind of a pain point for teams, is generating that content, compelling content in a really fast way that helps you scale your overall marketing program. So I think, over the past year plus, in particular, AI has just blown up and completely changed the landscape, and really enabled marketers to, be at the forefront of that in terms of figuring out ways to leverage those tools to scale their own programs. So I know there's a lot of folks in the creative community that were a little bit panicked, when OpenAI started to really blow up and everyone was playing with ChatGPT and Dolly and in the early days. But what's exciting is seeing a lot of the creative community embrace AI in a way that is taking that content and helping to elevate those programs and create more robust stories and cinematic universes, if you like, as it relates to content. So I think, having your marketing team be really open to leading into those tools. I always said to my team at Walmart, it's not AI that's going to replace your job. It's the folks using AI that will. So I think the more we can adopt those practices, the better. I think there's some other, sort of hacks that I've uncovered over the last couple of years too that have really helped me scale my programs, which is I know influencers obviously have become a big part of everyone's marketing mix, and not to take away from that space by any means, but I think there are other ways that we can be generating really compelling content and not necessarily leaning into folks who have massive followings of millions of people to untap new audiences, but rather partnering with UGC creators at a much more cost-effective rate. And it's not really necessarily about leaning on their audience to unlock new audiences for your own brand, but rather how do you generate really compelling content quickly that you can be pushing out through your own channels. So that's sort of a more recent hack that I've been really excited about.
So
and I
what
would
are some of the specifics on that, like Heather? So how can brands actually utilize that strategy? Like things that we've done before for some of our D2C e-commerce brands is that we didn't even pay influencers. We actually just sent them free product, and it was the believers in the product that actually wanted to use it that would create the best content to educate and entertain people. And so whatever it may be, and it was just all through cold outreach, Instagram, email, and saying, hey, I follow you because you're a top thought leader, whether it's beauty, fashion, finance, or whatnot, and just giving them free product. And then we set up affiliate links, and then we've grown like 6 to 7 figures in affiliate links just through people, that otherwise, aren't given the light of day, like the mega influencers that are out there that probably get hundreds of requests. But yeah, finding these niche influencers worked really, really well for the brands.
completely agree. So there's two things. One, when you're working with more of a micro influencer community and getting the product, or depending on the brand, but getting the product into their hands for them to start actually using it and believing in your brand, I think there's obviously a lot more value around those authentic testimonials and having folks convey their authentic experience with your brand or product. I think there's a lot more value to that versus somebody who has been clearly paid to endorse your product with folks who may have never otherwise heard of your brand or used your brand in an organic sense. So if there's a way to tap into those micro influencers, I think that's really powerful. And luckily, over the last couple of years, a lot of platforms have spun up to enable marketers to do that at scale. I remember trying to do that working for a startup 10 years ago, and having these really passionate fans and customers and essentially advocates of our brand. And we wanted to amplify those stories, but it was really difficult to do that at scale, as you can imagine. So, and I think even for bigger brands, it's difficult to do that at scale. But luckily, over the last decade, there's been a lot of platforms that have popped up. I'll use Incense is one great example that help marketers and brands get in touch with those folks in a quick way so they can scale their programs a lot faster.
Wow, nice. As opposed to, what would you say, so for us, to find really genuine, authentic influencers, we actually hop on calls with people in the community and ask for their recommendation, and actually have done it outside of these platforms, which usually give recommendations, as opposed to doing things more authentically and actually not using that. But I'm kind of curious for you, how do you suss out an authentic testimonial? What is your test when you could know if this person's genuinely cares about the product and just otherwise just wants a paycheck out of the engagement?
I think you need to give them a beat to actually test it. I don't think that you can be too prescribed in terms of the content that you're trying to generate. Obviously, when you're partnering with a creator, you're going to be providing them with a brief and, helping them sort of understand the key messages that you're hoping to tease out from that content once it's produced. But I think in the best case scenario, you're giving them a little bit of time to actually experience the product. So when they come to record the content or write about your product, that it's coming from a place of actual experience and authentic interpretation versus, here's a brief, here's a script, here's what we need you to do. We need you to knock it out by this date. You're just never going to generate compelling content that way.
Got it. Yeah. Are there any specifics? Like one of the tips and tricks that we've used for startups is that when they're competing against a $1 billion brand, we actually have them do a product review and testimonial with that $1 billion brand compared to the startup, and then users can actually see a test. And so an example campaign that we did was actually for robotic vacuums. So there's robotic vacuum companies out there that are $1 billion brands, and there's startups that say, hey, we have a better product. And so the video that we made the UGC create was a cleaning comparison between the two products. But yeah, do you have any examples, like specific campaigns that you've done that work really well in terms of performance?
Let's see. Yeah, so I guess, and this isn't really, I don't think this is necessarily related to UGC creators and influencers so much as it is to, I guess, creative approach. Which actually was the other thing that I was hoping to touch on. I think, given how incredibly noisy the media landscape is at the moment, you have to take some really big creative swings. You have to be thinking way out of the box, visually speaking. And most importantly, is you really need to be tapped into the consumer and what the consumer is thinking and feeling and what are their challenges. So as one example, one of the brands that I was on point for while at Walmart was a hybrid mattress brand. And, we had a really comparable product compared to a lot of our top tier competitors, but at a much more competitive price, given we were part of the Walmart family and were able to develop those products, at scale. So we really leaned into the value messaging of that. Our competitors were coming in at a really high price point. So we were, competitive from that perspective, even though we had a very comparable offering, but just breaking it down in a way that made sense to the consumer. So for example, let's say we had like a 60-day money back guarantee, almost like calculating how much you would pay to test a mattress, per day, which was like very nominal. And then it was at, essentially no risk, because if it didn't work out for you, you could return the product. So I think just being really creative with how you're messaging, your unique proposition, but it has to be aligned with how the customer is thinking and feeling. And over the last couple of years, the economic environment has been really important to people and top of mind, cost of living. And so for us, carving out that value message was really important and performed really well for us.
Nice. Are there any like creatives? I know with mattresses, people dropping eggs on top of the mattress. That was really creative. Or showing like skeletons, or I'm just thinking of all these D2C e-commerce mattresses on how they did it. Casper was very creative with their sleep guarantee. But do you have any like creative swing examples that you've done?
I will say, if we're going to stay within that vertical, using mattresses as an example, a lot of competitors, and the one you just named being one brand that we definitely were watching. I think a lot of them focused more on technical specs of their products versus how those products would make you feel. So sleep has really become a part of health and wellness, right? Like it's really become, articulate this. I know you guys can edit this out. I'm just trying to collect my thoughts. But yeah, it's like an extension of the health and wellness vertical. So what we found was it served us to show, not tell. So instead of listing out all of those technical specs that that made our products really high quality. It was more, how is it going to make you feel? How is this going to enhance your sleep and your health and your wellness? And doing that in a really visual way versus, focusing on copper coils or reinforced siding. Like, there's all sorts of different technical ways you can describe that product, but I think helping the consumer understand how it's going to essentially enhance your sleep and enhance your life, that was really important, particularly for a product where people historically have gone into store to actually touch and feel and experience, obviously to understand how you're if you're going to be comfortable. So that's definitely, I think some creative storytelling certainly supported that.
Nice. Yeah, great. Yeah, on AI and marketing, yeah, would love to hear, like, how are you using AI now when it comes to D2C e-commerce marketing?
For sure. So I think custom photography, for example, is one thing that a lot of brands have obviously relied on forever and ever, and is something that is very resource heavy. It's something that takes a lot of time to turn around. So, one example, if you're a brand that has a bank of a lot of custom photography that maybe has become a little bit outdated, you can always take those existing assets and leverage a lot of AI tools to start manipulating that content and creating new and refreshed versions of that imagery. And, in some examples I've seen where photographers have taken their original photography and created these like really cinematic, beautiful worlds for brands. It's kind of like the sky is literally the limit. If you can think about it, if you can dream it up, you can create it. And it's not necessarily, it doesn't all have to sit within the creative department. This is something that marketing departments and channel leads can actually start to participate in and play in and contribute to that overall creative production that is often such a huge dependency in terms of getting marketers all the assets they need in order to execute and hit their targets. So it's, I think, a really exciting time to be in marketing.
Yeah, agreed. Are there any standout AI marketing tools that are just like must use right now that you're using? I know that AI marketing agents are really going to be a big thing. If you can imagine, like Shopify and whatnot, it is so time intensive to edit photos, to upload them, to write content descriptions, especially when you have catalogs of 10,000 plus. I'm sure even for Walmart, millions of SKUs. But yeah, are there any AI marketing tools that you really love right now?
Yeah, for sure. So Adobe, as most marketing or most creative teams are already using Adobe Creative Suite. So Adobe has launched a ton of great AI tools within their platform, which is wonderful, because if you already have a license with this, a platform that is widely used, and then they're integrating all of these tools for folks to start playing with. So that's one big piece. I've also found a lot of other media partners have started to integrate AI tools within their platforms. So, using SMS as an example, Attentive has added some really great AI tools in terms of generating optimized copy and generating imagery, and obviously ChatGPT, using that not necessarily and certainly not to replace the copywriters, but it is nice to be able to lean on tools like that to kind of get a good jump start on developing copy, and then obviously going in and refreshing that copy and adding your brand voice and your brand tone. So it's just, more than anything, it's helping folks scale, and kind of removing any of those limitations in terms of developing really incredible visuals. Like, again, the sky's the limit. So yeah, I would say Adobe. A lot of media platforms have great tools natively, and of course ChatGPT.
Nice. Yeah, and we've been using Sora to brainstorm the creative with the influencer before it's actually shot. So say, for example, it's really expensive to do a commercial, and specifically if we're using a consumer electronic, the certain angle, the layout, the storyboard. Nowadays, you can just use AI just to kind of brainstorming, and that way, when we're deploying large media budgets with influencers, it's like it's more clear as opposed to us. We used to like hand draw the storyboard for these influencer creatives. I know Mr. Beast too. He even says he's using it just to like showcase the scenes and whatnot.
So. Oh, that's very cool. Noted.
Yeah. Anything else, Heather, just in terms of, any insights that you can share and just overall tips, tricks for D2C e-commerce marketing?
For sure. I would say pivoting a little bit away from content and creative and getting a little bit more into media investment. One thing that I have advocated for a lot over the past few years is starting to lessen that dependency on paid media investment by really building out holistic marketing program that, is looking at performance, leveraging whether it's MTA or MMM models, understanding how your channels are influencing one another. I find, some companies are still looking at things in a really linear way, and the consumer journey is no longer linear. We need to be making sure that we are developing content that is reaching folks at the right time and where they're consuming content. So I think understanding where how your channels are influencing each other, and I do think that there's a lot of value in investing in personalization tools and really building out your CRM and lifecycle marketing strategy to, again, just sort of lessen that dependency on increasing investment in paid media year over year over year. I think we need to start shifting a little bit more to like focusing on our retention strategies and how are you continuing to have a conversation with your customer? How are you listening to your customer and fostering that relationship? I think that has become a little bit lost in today's paid media landscape. So I think the more brands can be tuned into that piece, I think the better off they'll be, and from a sustainable standpoint too. It's becoming very incredibly noisy and competitive. So you need to have really cut through content, touching on what we were discussing before, but be really diversifying that marketing program and continuing to foster a relationship with your customer.
I love it. Do you have any examples of that? Like even I think about the mall, right? It used to be that people expect you to just go in there and purchase, and then you see these D2C e-commerce brands like Allbirds selling shoes, and they understand that people just go to the store, they want to feel it, try it, and then they'll go buy it online. So it's not linear, exactly like you said. And then even setting up a run club, and so more experiential now. And then even there's like Aloe and Lululemon creating these experiential gyms to like bring their customer in, and it's a way for them to connect and really understand what their needs are. But do you have any like examples on how to like lessen that dependency on media and just what brands are doing it really well right now?
We talk a lot about how, particularly post-pandemic, how folks became so disconnected from their communities and from their peers and certainly from their brands, and brand loyalty has continued to decrease year over year to where people are much more, I think, focused on things like value if from a D2C standpoint. But I think the more opportunities there are to connect with folks in real life, that is an investment in a long-term relationship with your customer. That's something that can help you to grow your LTV. I do think companies that are doing that are probably going to have an edge, because it's almost like we swung too far into the digital, world, where we just started to kind of, I think, become a little bit disconnected from each other as a community, but certainly from our customers. So I think that the brands you highlighted are knocking it out of the park, and I think we'll have an edge going forward.
Awesome. Well, Heather, I appreciate your time and for sharing your insights. And anything in closing that you want to share?
Let's see. I would just say, we're obviously still in the midst of holiday, which is a really incredibly busy time for marketers, and we're kind of shifting into that sort of last minute shopping, I guess, part of the cycle. But my advice would be, for the biggest sales event of for a lot of brands, a lot of D2C brands, Q4 is your biggest quarter. I think planning out a multi-phased approach, and sort of pivoting your messaging and your creative to align with how folks are thinking and feeling as they move through Q4. So you've got your early shoppers, and you have your deal seekers and your last minute shoppers, and eventually your post holiday folks. I think being able to to really speak to those different phases of the shopping cycle is important, and giving your creative team the space to ideate in flight, so they have the opportunity to pivot, by planning, well in advance. I think will give companies an edge. And the last thing I guess I'll leave you on is just not being afraid of investing in upper funnel. And I know that can be a really scary term for a lot of companies, particularly the finance folks, but investing in upper funnel awareness early, in Q4, and building those audiences and swelling those pools. So when it comes time to reaching sort of that peak shopping time, that your brand is top of mind. In my experience, that has actually helped lessen the dependency on paid media, in that upfront investment has then led to much more efficiency across other channels where we're capturing demand, like CRM and SEM. So just being mindful of that.
Nice, very awesome. Well, cool. Thanks, Heather. Really appreciate it.
You bet. My pleasure. Great chatting with you, Jeff.